Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or what I usually say is hello my dears. Today we're going to talk just a bit about how to have God-centered academics within university. So I just finished my first year of university, which by my, understanding, that's crazy because I feel like I just finished high school, so it's crazy that I'm moving on to my second year of uni. But now that I've kind of gone through uni and I've learned a lot of lessons, I do definitely want to do a little debrief about how we as Christians, especially university, should make God the center of our academics and not put our identity in our grades. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about how necessarily I try to put God in the center of my life in terms of academics, and how I saw that, grow into something that was really beautiful during my time in university within my first year. So in terms of uni, one of the first tips that I would give is definitely to surround yourself with other Christians. Okay, so I'm going to read a verse. It's 1 Corinthians 15:33, and it says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." So this is really important, and within this passage, like the historical context is that the Corinthians themselves were listening to people who were basically skewing their understanding of what the resurrection was, and they were questioning, like, is there even a resurrection in the first place? And it was who they were around, essentially, that had such a large effect on essentially how they thought and how they acted and essentially how they lived out their lives. So essentially they were thinking, like, the resurrection, like, did it even happen? They were like, there is no resurrection, but like who they were around was essentially reinforcing those thoughts. And that goes to show that who we are around has a very big influence on how we think and how we act. And I would say that I know that from personal experience. It could be, let's say, in elementary school where, I was around certain people who weren't godly. And so how I would think or how I would act would reflect how they were acting. And I found that not only put a halt to my relationship with God, but also to the plan that he had for my life. That being said, especially within university, like, I found it really hard to find godly friends. I won't lie. I think I have like one. And one thing that I can say is that when you're in such a new territory, it's very important that you're surrounded with people who are like-minded as you. There's nothing wrong with meeting new people and, seeing other hobbies that other people do. But I think there is a very big line in terms of, who we walk with and who we hang out with. And if you find yourself hanging out with people of this world, you can get led astray very, very fast. I've seen it happen. And I find it's really important to, be around a Christian community. Like, I might not have as many Christian friends from experience, but having my family around me, and they're very, very in that manner, like, they're in their word, like, they pray, they are focused on what the Lord has called them to do, not only guides me towards doing what I know that God has called me to do, but it also prepares me to not be or act in a way that is of this world. So by surrounding yourself with people who are godly and also people who want to reflect the Lord, whether that's your friends or your family during university, that goes a long way. And that not only affects, how you act and how you talk, but it also affects your goals. It affects your trajectory of life. And it's important that you surround yourself with people who not only have the same goals as you, but most importantly have the same beliefs as you. Because more often than not, we surround ourselves with people who don't, and we end up leading ourselves astray, and we end up doing things that we shouldn't be doing. And that's why it says in the verse, do not be deceived, because so many times we think, oh, like, it's not that big of a deal, like, it's not gonna matter who I'm around. Like, it matters and it adds up. And I find, especially in high school, like when I was like 9th and 10th grade, I was not hanging out with the best people for me, and that had effect on, how I worked, my work ethic, my grades, right? We do want to do good for the Lord, yes, and we need to now make sure that who we are around not only adds to that, but they're supporting us in that journey. If they're pushing us farther from Christ, then they shouldn't be in our lives. So that's one tip that I would say is very important in uni. Surround yourself with godly people so that you can stay focused during this race and during this run that you're called to run. Also, guys, I don't have a mic, as you know, and I've talked a bit about that in my other video, so I'm using my phone. The hope is that when I edit this, it doesn't look crazy. So if it does look crazy right now, I'm really sorry. That was never the plan. And if it doesn't look crazy, the next tip I would say is pray before every test or assignment, or really anything in general. Personally, I think this is a really good tip because I find that by praying, not only is your mind on the Lord, but it's not on your worries. So I'm going to pull up a verse so that we understand what we're talking about. So we have Philippians 4:6, and it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God." And I'm going to read verse 7. "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." So at first when this point came up in my brain, I was like, okay, how can I connect this back to having a God-centered university experience? So I went on BibleRef and many other websites to kind of understand it. But the first thing to addressing the problem, and the best way to first address a problem, is by prayer. Yes, you might have times where you need other people to help you and you might need additional support. But when you first encounter any problem in your life, go to prayer, go to God. That's the first thing that you want to do. So when I have, let's say, an exam or a test, and I had a lot of those and a lot of midterms, I prayed. I prayed during the studying for it. I prayed before I even did it because number one, a lot of the time we think if I study enough and if I do enough, I'm going to do great. And yes, you're supposed to put in the work. You're supposed to put in the effort. But if you try doing all those things without the Lord, it amounts to nothing. I recognize that when I was studying and working hard and getting the grades that I wanted and leaving God out of that, yeah, you might be able to get those grades, but it amounts to nothing if you have no purpose behind why you're doing it. So I find when I pray before, when I, ask the Lord for help while I'm studying, not only do I go over things that I've missed because I'm leaning on the Lord's wisdom, not my own, but I find that the way that I remember those things and how I can apply my knowledge is so much more better and more executed when God is at the center. Because really, you can only do so much on your own. If I tried to get through my first and second semester of uni on my own, I would have failed. I am serious. But by putting God in the center, it's not just about getting the grades you want, but it's by recognizing that you can't lean on yourself in this journey. You have to lean on the Lord. And you do so through prayer. You do so through coming to Him in thanksgiving. And it even says in the following verse 7, that we have promised peace by doing that. That doesn't mean that you're not going to face anxiety and worry when certain things come up and certain assignments, stress you out and they're all due on the same day. But that means that in going to the Lord and praying and bringing Him our requests and thanking Him in gratitude, we have a promised peace. And I would rather a promised peace than anxiety that would be on me because I was too prideful to give God my worries and to give God my stresses. So I would definitely recommend, especially having a God-centered academics within university, going to the Lord, right? Praying before any test or any midterm or any assignment, or even if you're just walking on campus, pray, talk to God. Because not only are you now putting God first in your mind, but now everything you do flows from what God has called you to do, flows from that gratitude, it flows from that peace that He's given you. And personally, from my experience, I would rather be so focused on the Lord, right, in those times of worry and stress than so focused on my anxiety. I found that when I was glorifying God and talking to Him more and, praising Him for His goodness before every test and before every exam, the exam was now not about, could I get the grade that I want? It was about, let me honor the Lord with the work that He's called me to put in. Let me honor the Lord in faith and get the grade that reflects His goodness and His mercy during my whole time of studying. Okay, so my next point to make God the center of our university academics is to listen to worship music when you study. And the verse I'm going to reference is Psalms 143 verse 5. And this was of David. And he was saying, I remember the days of old. I meditate on all that you have done. I ponder the work of your hands. So David really was looking back to the times where, the Lord has, taken care of him. Those good days, the days when life was good and life was bliss, right? We all have those days. And I think the great thing about worship music is a lot of the music embodies what the Lord has done for us in the past, what He will do again. It embodies, how He's taken care of prophets of old, how He's taken care of His children, in the past, and how He will do so now. And the reason why I think we should listen to worship music when we study is because it's a reminder of what God has done and what he will do again. There's a lot of songs that I don't remember exactly, but there's a bunch of songs that will reference what the Lord has done, with people in the Old Testament Bible, what he has done for maybe people who were going through hardship. And I find when I listen to those songs and think about, okay, like what he's done in the past and how he's helped me in the past, and building up that praise and that worship and looking back on what he's done and the good that he has done, not only strengthens me to keep on going, but reminds me that he's not going to leave me in the present. So listening to songs, especially like these worship songs, are very good because they put you in a mindset of faith and of hope. They remind you that yes, life is difficult at times, but if the Lord was able to get me through it when it was really, really struggling, like these songs remind me that yes, my situation, my present situation might suck, things might not be as good as I want them to be, but a lot of worship songs reinforce what God has done in the past, reinforce God's character, reinforce God's goodness, and thus gives us hope that if he did it in the past, he will do it again. So there's a couple of artists that I do listen to, mainly Sondae. I think he's a great Christian artist because he reinforces genuine Christian struggle in a way that I've seen not a lot of artists are able to do. I do listen to Tribl music. I think that's what it's called. And I think there is a couple of others. So when you listen to Christian music, it should not be about you. It should not be about, me. It should be about Jesus. And that's just a little tip to find good Christian music. But as I was saying, a lot of the songs that I listen to remind me of God's goodness and his faithfulness to the end, right? And I find that, like David, when not just even in worship music, but when you look back on the amazing things that God has done, you can have so much hope that he will do it again. Especially when you're studying and you have a really stressful midterm coming up for general chemistry or physics, you're like, Lord, what the heck am I gonna do? When you think back what he's done for you before, or when you listen to music that reinforces that he takes care of his children, that not only puts you in a mindset of hope, but it gives you that encouragement to keep on going and to let the Lord see it through. And I won't lie, this year combined, my first year of university was difficult. The first couple of weeks were very, very treacherous. I was really stressed out, I won't lie. But the only way that I was able to get through all the hurdles and jumps that came with, university was with Jesus. It didn't matter, how much I studied. It didn't matter how much help I got. It didn't matter the extra hoops that I went to make sure I did well. If my faith wasn't in Christ and if he wasn't helping me, I would not have done as good as I was able to do. So I think a really big key pillar in, putting God in the center of our university schoolwork and just university as a whole, worship him, listen to worship music, right? Listen to music that reinforces his goodness and his character, and meditate on that. Meditate on that music, because not only will that restore in you hope, but it will restore in you, joy. And you need that, especially within university. The last point that I want to make, so I hope this video is not too short, but the last point that I want to make is to remember that studying is an act of worship. So the next verse is 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. And it says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." And this verse came up in my brain when I was thinking about study being an act of worship. And I was like, okay, well, how does this really apply to, studying being an act of worship? And then I kind of had to do some research, and I was like, okay, well, what is worship in the first place? And I went on a website, and it was from Desiring God, and they had a couple of points of what worship was, but one of them stuck out to me. And they were essentially seeing worship as valuing God and putting God above all things, meaning that you're not putting yourself first, you're not putting, your family first, you're putting God first. You are making him your only priority. So in that understanding, when we do everything for the glory of God, being whether I eat or I drink, whether I study, when I study, doing that for God's glory and for his praise ultimately puts yourself in a humble position. You're not putting yourself above God in that. You're putting God at the only pedestal that he should be first, right? When you're choosing to glorify God with all that you do, you are putting God first. You're putting him above everything. You're basically saying that I want everything that I do to reflect him. I want everything that I do to glorify him. And that is an act of worship. That is saying, Lord, I treasure you and I value you so much that I want everything that I do to reflect you, and at the end of the day, to glorify you. I want when people see me working hard, I want them to say, wow, I wonder what is pushing Eden to do that. And I want to use that to glorify the Lord, not myself. That's what we really should be doing. Studying is such a blessing from the Lord. It's exhausting. It is exhausting. I won't lie. But to have that ability to get an education and to learn and to do things that are hard, use that for God's glory. Let people know that he is so good, that he has carried you so far. Let your studying and your hard work be a reflection of God's goodness, be a reflection of God's strength within you, and glorify him in all you do. Glorify him in your studying, glorify him in your discipline and in your diligence, glorify him in everything that you do. Glorify him in attending school, glorify him in the grades that you get. Don't let anything that you do, and don't let anything that the Lord has put on your heart be for yourself. Let it all glorify the Lord. And you will see there's so much purpose in what you do when you do that. There's so much. Personally, for me, when I let everything that I do glorify God, there's purpose in it. It's not, oh, I'm doing this so that it looks good for this application. It looks good for this school. I'm doing it for the Lord. And when I do it for the Lord, it has emphasis, it has eternal weight and eternal glory. And I'm doing it with an eternal purpose, a divine purpose that's beyond me. And I think it's just really important to not let our studying become a distraction, to not let our grades become our identity, but let everything we do academically, everything we do related to university, everything we do in life glorify God, and let that be an act of worship to him. Okay, guys, I think that is the end of today's video. I'm trying to get more back in my, Christian, lessons kind of videos, and I usually was doing that a lot last summer. I'm back in the summer again, so we're back with these videos. Like I said, I'm gonna try posting regularly, you know what I mean, and I'm just gonna keep on praising the Lord, and so should you. Remember, this Christian journey is not easy. It is very difficult, I will not lie. Spiritual warfare ain't no joke, but we lean on the Lord, we have faith, and we see that at the end of the day his name will be glorified, and all we can do is just thank the Lord for his mercy and for accepting us into his family. I love you guys.